So good to see everybody. I mean that. Good morning. Welcome in. We have one beautiful, I would say day, but few hours left, right? It's going to be tanking. Man, what a wonderful week we've had. Incredible Christmas. Hope yours was as good as ours was, or even better. That would be prime. So Bible-wise, this morning we're looking into, I think you could probably say, without a doubt, the most famous story in the book of Daniel, and quite possibly the most familiar story in all of Scripture. We're going to be dealing, of course, with Daniel and the lion's den. We're going to go back strictly to a story today, which appropriately means for next week we'll be going back to symbols. Okay? But for today, we're in Daniel chapter 6. Please open to that, if you will. And I know we know this story super well, obviously, but I'm going to try throughout it to bring out some things that maybe we don't highlight as often, and I'm pretty confident that we can all walk away with having learned some new things today. So Daniel chapter 6, in the first verse, things are going very well for Daniel. In our new kingdom, we've been in Babylon and we're done with that. The Persians have come over and taken it over. Remember, there's a Medo, or a Median influence to this empire. And Cyrus the Great is the Persian conqueror of Babylon. But we read at the end of chapter 5, it's been a few periods ago, that someone is put over the Babylonian section. And what's his name? Well, it's not stated he's put over the Babylonian section, but we know this from history. What's his name? Darius. Very good. And Darius is the Mede, he's known as. There's some people who believe this is the same individual, just known by two different names. I don't think that's the case, and I believe it's going to be established biblically at the end of chapter 6 today. But Darius, remember, is over the Babylonian sector. This is a huge empire. And so you have Cyrus the Great, who's over all, and especially the Persian side. This other guy is a co-ruler, Darius, that helps. And we read about this government in verse 1 of Daniel 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120, what are called in my version, maybe yours also, I know quite a few are this way, satraps. That means nothing to me. Maybe it does to you. To be over the whole kingdom. Now, I don't think the reference here is to like the whole kingdom, but the whole sector over which he rules, the Median kingdom, and 120 of them. So what exactly is a satrap, and what would your job be? A what? Okay, good thought there. A soothsayer. What do you have? Yes, sir. Like a province? Very good. And so it would be a person over a province. Makes a lot of sense. The contemporary English version and the Message translate this as governor. And that actually makes a whole lot of sense, that explanation, Roy. It's like a mini king, an executive officer. So with a lot of power and a sovereign kind of, but not big sovereign, a little sovereign. And that's why I like the word governor right here. It makes a lot of sense to us. So we have the United States, and we have more than a ruler. We often look at it as, I don't like looking at it this way. We don't have a king over us. President's not a king, okay? But we do have the chief executive officer in our president. But underneath, we have how many governors? 50. And they're executive officers. They are sovereign in their rule, save for the central government's influence there, right? So I like that idea that these are like 120 governors. And listen, this is a huge, expansive area. You probably remember, I don't have a map today, but you've seen enough on the screen to know what the Babylonian Empire was. The Persian Empire is even larger, than absorbs everything, which is within Babylon. So, I mean, this thing is enormous, and it makes sense that you're going to need these governors over all these different areas. Roy? And then we'll go to Joe. Yeah, I agree. And you're playing to me right here. You're talking to a states' rights guy, okay? So I'm not going to say much more, but I agree entirely. Yeah, I think it fits really well. Joe? Outside of war and taxation, you're on your own pretty much. Monetary system also became... Right. Right. And even early on, not the monetary system, right? And then it later becomes that. Yeah, okay. I love you guys, just so you know. I love you guys. Yeah, yeah. I'm a big Jefferson guy. Okay, I'm moving on. All right, so verse 1. So please Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea to look at this as like governors or executive rulers. It's more than just like, you're kind of in charge of a province. It's like you're over a state. You run that state. Verse number 2, and over these 3 governors. I'm sorry, I just made things confusing for you. But I think there's a better word here than governors, personally, if you ask me. And over these 3 governors, the English Standard Version here, which I know many of you are using, reads president. I don't know if that's the best word for it. I mean, it's one who presides, a presiding officer. It's okay. I mean, just as far as how we would understand it. I love this one from the Message. Vice Regent. Vice Regent. So to us, that kind of computes to what? Vice President. Yeah, except instead of having 1 vice president, it would be like you have 3 vice presidents. So I think that kind of helps. If you look at the 120 to be like governors over their individual states or provinces, united, of course, under the one empire. And then look at this as like 3 vice presidents. So these guys are the only ones who are underneath the president, in this case, king himself. And we read of whom Daniel was one. Daniel's doing all right, isn't he? This is a guy who goes into the Babylonian Empire as a slave. And he rises up the ranks quickly and becomes number 2 in charge in Babylon. And then, tragically, it would seem for him, a new empire comes in and conquers that one. You know, he's probably held over or quickly rises up the ranks also. And we read that he is, worst case scenario, 4th place. But really, he's like tied for 2nd in power in the new empire. That's pretty impressive. I want to pause right here. Daniel in the lion's den. If I recall correctly on the Bible mini-series, a lot of good things that are in it. This is one thing I would say, probably not the most accurate. Daniel's, fairly young, or at least in the prime of his life, it seems like. That's not the way it is. Daniel's an aged man by this point. He's one of the ones who goes into Babylonian captivity. How long are they controlled by the Babylons, the Israelites? 70 years, so what are we looking at here? Now, in the Old Testament Survey Series commentary by James Smith, he says, by his calculations, Daniel's about 82 years old. I think that's very generous, very conservative. I think there's a good chance he's more like 90, and maybe even 90 plus. He is not anywhere near a young man by this point. So Daniel, an aged man, is one of these 3 governors. I like to see them as tri-equal vice presidents, that the satraps or the governors might give account to them. Okay, so you have the king, Cyrus over all, and then you have like a 1A over the Median influence of the kingdom in Darius, and then underneath those, you have like 3 vice presidents or vice kings, vice regents, one of whom is Daniel, and then underneath those you have the umbrella, 120 governors over the individual provinces and states. So this is the hierarchy, and there's reporting that takes place so that the king would suffer no loss. And I think the meaning behind that is to make sure all the peasants pay their taxes as they should. That's how the royal family and the rule here is going to thrive. Who do you think the king is who's referenced here? So that the king suffers no loss. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. I think Justin is probably number 1 king, the great one. Probably Cyrus the Great. And Darius, it seems, is answering even to him, and he has to make sure all the Babylonian side is run correctly, and especially that the king doesn't get cheated out of money. You can do a lot of things to the government and get by with it. You can't take the government's money or hold on to the government's money and get by with it. What do you think happens if Darius doesn't do a great job in ruling over the monetary affairs of his side of government? For sure, someone's going to pay the price. For sure, he's going to lose his power, and quite possibly he's going to lose his life. So he has to make sure that all of his ducks are in a row, and this guy, in wisdom, sets up all this sub-government underneath him to make sure, and you might say, that's a lot of bureaucracy. Yeah, it's a lot of power and an important life that he's protecting in his own also. Verse number 3, we won't read that because we're going to quote it, please. Daniel 6:3. I know 10's a really familiar one and a powerful one. We do that a lot, though, so let's do verse 3 instead. Daniel 6:3. All right, Roy. Wow. What a treat, huh? So right now, he seems like tied for second. Maybe at worst, he's in fourth place. He's going to be recognized as over all of the others. It sounds like, probably. And the reason for that, and I like your wording that you used there from your translation, Roy, because of the, was it excellent? Not excellent, what was it? What kind of qualities? Exceptional. I was thinking it was a different word. Mine's excellent. So, all right, for the exceptional qualities that are found in him. What a high compliment that's paid. You don't read this a lot, something like this in the Bible. Keep your spot here. Turn to Numbers chapter 14. I know it's been a few moons since we studied Numbers. But back in Numbers, the 14th chapter, there's a similar remark that's made about someone who's a great servant of God. Numbers 14, verse 20. Then the Lord said, I have pardoned the people who should be destroyed because of their rebelling against Moses' leadership, wanting to go back to Egypt. But truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. And none of those who despise me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Now again, I would say you don't find this remark a lot, but it wasn't really too far back that we saw it about one of only 2 guys in this generation. Caleb, he's different, God says. He has a different spirit in him. In my version, Roy, in the memory verse for today, Daniel 6:3, it says that Daniel possessed an excellent spirit within him. Now my question is, what excellent spirit is this? I like your translation. It sounds like the translators thought it to be proper to put in exceptional qualities. And that may be what the writer has in mind, but it may be something else also. Turn backward from Daniel 6 to Daniel 5. Daniel 5, so not far from where we are. In verses 10 through 12, the queen, and this is under the last rule under the Babylonian Empire, the queen, or queen mother, because of the words of the king, Belshazzar, and his lords came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the Spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of all these people, the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. So for some time, there's been this understanding about this man that he's unique, and it could be the reference here is that it's understood that the Holy Spirit or the Spirit of God actually is in this man, which would make a lot of sense because he has a book in the Bible. He is a prophet. God is revealing things to him from heaven. Or it could simply be saying he has a tremendous disposition. He's full of wisdom and knowledge. He's a guy who is advanced in understanding and relationships, and you want him in charge, or it might be a combination of those two. Because the Spirit of the Holy God is in him, he has all of these tremendous qualities about him. So that takes us through verse 3 of Daniel 6 in our text. I want to repeat this. Daniel is in a good spot. He's lived a long life away from home. This guy's basically been ruling the world for how many decades now? Under now multiple regimes, things are going very well. How could it possibly get any better? Well, it just might not. When you find yourself in a high spot, don't be surprised if some challenges are coming your way. There's an evil plan that is contrived toward God's servant Daniel. Verse 4 of our chapter. So the governors and satraps, that is the fellow governors or vice regents and the satraps, sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. So let's see some way he's living in violation to Persian law, and then maybe we can get him. But they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found within him. I want to have a couple sides of discussion right here. Number one, why could they not find any dirt on Daniel involving politics? Okay, he's a pretty sharp guy by this point, number one. The people who are in politics learn to be, pretty smart about handling things. You don't normally see a guy like this, though, in politics, especially who's been around for decades in it. It's not uncommon to see people to step into politics, and when they come in, you're like, yeah, I like that gal or that guy. I get behind that person, common person just like me. What is it that seems like maybe even only a couple, but a lot of times at least by say 5 years later, seems like a rotten scoundrel just like all the others, and you want him out of there. Well, why? What happens? Money and power. And I'm not sure if it's 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, 1 and 1A, but man, those two, they just seem to go hand in hand. It is so difficult, human beings, to handle success. And in particular, money and power. I think that's probably in part what Jesus has in mind when he says to his disciples how difficult it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. The problem isn't with riches. The problem isn't with initially getting them, but over time, the way our mindset and our handling of a blessing often changes. I think that's, again, in part probably what he has in mind. And the guy who's struggling with riches, with Jesus, who he talks to, what's his position? He's a prince? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not used to hearing that, so I thought, no, you're wrong. He's a prince or a ruler. So he has power. And those two things combined can become dangerous for us as temptations. So Daniel, though, he's been doing this for decades, and it's crazy. He's the exception to the rule. There is nothing that is found wrong in him with how he handles things in the kingdom, which is also impressive with, I'm sure, how often he handled money in addition to power. Doesn't abuse it in any way. He follows all the laws of the land. Why is he following all the laws of the land so well? Huh? There we go. This is a God thing. And I find it very unique among Christians. You think about among all those who are irreligious in politics, how many of them do you find just squeaky clean, trustworthy individuals? Okay, and I would say in yesteryears, just as many. Yeah. He said, nowadays, no. I don't think ever, really, but no, you're right. We don't see it today. All right, I'm not going to pick on any certain religion, so I'm not going to name any one, but you just go through them in your mind. Non-Christian religions, and look at people who you know are A, B, C, D, E, or F religions. Do you trust them? They seem like just really solid individuals who do a good job in government. Kind of interesting, isn't it? I'm going to suggest that it's largely, if not entirely, unique among Christianity. And I know Christianity doesn't exist back then. It's Judaism back then. And we're not talking about like the worldly material Judaism, okay? Zionism. We're talking about as God intended for it to be. Those of a heartfelt religion. It's unique. What does God tell us to do today, since I mentioned Christianity? Romans chapter 13. Romans 13, 1 and 2. Let every soul who belongs to Him be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist have been appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. You want to have problems in your life? Well, ignore what I say and disobey the government. See what happens to you. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do what is good. Listen to this, verse 15 in 1 Peter 2, as he continues. He says in verse 15, for this is the will of God, that by doing good, that is obeying the government and every rule that the government puts into place, you will put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Translation. As Christians, when we're trying to tell people, hey, here's what God expects out of you and here's what you need to do, they're going to try to look in things they understand better than religion to accuse you of breaking rules. And they're going to look to the rules of this land. Now, that might be a silly, childish tactic. That's, I think, what God is saying here. It's foolish, what they do. But when you're obeying rules and other paradigms of which you're a part, and you're submitting yourself, and then you're telling them, well, God has rules He wants you to follow also, you will shut their mouths when they try to accuse you of violating rules in other paradigms. Does that make sense? Now, let's look back right here to Daniel's life. They're trying to find some area in which they might accuse him in another paradigm than the one that's the most important, religion. They look into politics. And why can they find him doing absolutely nothing wrong within the kingdom? Because he's a servant of the Most High. And the Most High God puts governments in place and tells His people to follow them even when they might not be the best people who are in power, even though they might be corrupt themselves. Now, as we have more discussion on this, we're going to find there is an exception to that rule that Daniel's going to follow, and there's an exception to that rule for us today also. But for right now, generally speaking, that's God's rule. Daniel's following it. Verse number 5. Then these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. What do you think they mean by that? I know it sounds self-explanatory, but I don't think it's quite as simple as it sounds. The only way that we're going to find him doing anything wrong is if he violates something violates some law that his God tells him to do. I don't think they're talking about we need to learn the Jewish religion, the ins and outs of it, and then we're probably going to find him on a Sabbath doing some work that he shouldn't be doing. I don't think that's what they have in mind here. Well, what do you think they're probably meaning by this? Yes, I'm sorry. Excellent. Now that makes perfect sense, Adam. I agree with you. I don't think it's something where they're going to find him violating his law and his religion. I think they know that's paramount to him. But it's weird because he doesn't violate any law in the kingdom either. So what's more important to him? The law of his God. So I agree with you. I think what they're saying is we're going to have to get him to violate the law of the land through the following of the law of his God. So I think they probably searched through the Persian laws really well, and they're finding, it's a fairly tolerant government. And I think they're finding, this religion can perfectly coincide with the government that we have in place. So they have a problem on their hands, and they're going to have to get creative. Verse 6, so these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. I like that terminology of thronging. I don't know if any of you has. It might be like falling before or fawning over the king. Oh, king, you're so good looking. You're so smart. Why is everything that you do so successful? They're laying it on thick. Oh, king, live forever. We love you. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together. And that's when you know government's doing something good. When they say, everyone's in consensus about this, and that's a really simple way of saying you don't even need to think about it. It's already been thought through. All the experts have checked the ins and the outs. This is the only way that things ought to go. Don't ever question the government, whatever you do. Government knows best. To establish a royal statute, to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, a whole month, except you, O king. What's the implication here? Whoever petitions any god or man except for you, O king. What are they saying about King Darius? That he's above the law? He makes law, doesn't he? Yeah, he's in charge. And they're actually deifying this man. As strange as that sounds to us, back then this wasn't really all that odd. It was common for rulers, especially over empires, and in particular Persian kings, to think that they were God on earth. You see that with the pharaohs, the Roman emperors down the line. Super common, maybe some presidents that we've had in our country. People get to thinking more of themselves as what they should. And when someone's just feeding it to you, it's easy to buy in. And especially, don't forget, this guy's early on at this point in his rule, and he wants to be established, exalted, and respected. So now's the perfect time for this to happen to him. Anyone who petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Whew. Now, O king, don't delay. It's all been thought out. All the writing's right here. All you have to do is pick up that pen and sign your name, and it's done. And if you do it, it cannot be changed. You know this. According to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Now, this is a staple of this empire. If you ever put a law into place, there's no revoking it. That's the way it is. Therefore, King Darius, maybe without even thinking about it, it would sound, sign the written decree. What a great lesson to pause, to think, to use your own human computer that God has given you, even if everybody in the world, even everybody in the government, is all on the same page about it. It's okay to differ in a conclusion that you draw. Just make sure that you first rationally think it out. Verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And what do you think his mindset is that day? You ever gone home from the polls, or even just gone to bed after an election, whether it's on a proposition or a ruler, whether it's governor, a senator, representative, the president, and you go home and you ever just think, what have we done as a people? What is my nation doing right now? What does our future even hold? What do you think Daniel has in his mind as he's going home? He knows what's been done. The writing's been signed. He goes home, and in his upper room, with his windows wide open toward Jerusalem, He knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Now, question for you. Number one, do you think his windows have to be open for him to pray, to be heard by God and answered? Well, why is he going to do what he knows is an open defiance to a law that he tries to follow as best he can, and he's probably better at it than anybody in the empire? Why wouldn't you just keep the windows closed and the doors shut and the curtains pulled over the windows? And I mean, God's still going to hear, isn't he? Why would he do this? Marcy? I think that's so beautifully stated, Marcy. Simply put, he's not afraid. I don't think this guy is afraid. All right, number one, he's lived apart from the promised land basically all of his life, except for the early portions. He's, James Smith says, 82 years old. I think that's probably not entirely accurate myself. I think he's more like 90 years old. What's the average span of a person's life? Moses says 70, by reason of strength 80. Strange that 3,500 years later, all the medical advancements, really nothing's changed since that. This guy's already on borrowed time, all right? He hasn't been home for almost 100 years. It could be he's ready to go home, all right? Maybe he's thinking that. Or it might be just he has no fear, and he knows the power that his God holds also. Now, this was early on in his life, but what did he see when he shortly thereafter entered into the Babylonian Empire? What did this guy view for himself? What are his 3 friends' names? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Listen, you can't get through this hot fire, and especially not when it's made 7 times hotter than normal. That's not possible. The people who throw your friends in are vaporized by the heat coming off, and they're not harmed by the fire, and their clothes don't even smell like smoke whenever they come out. This guy's seen some stuff in his life. I'd like to think, Marcy, he has a lot of faith. And because of that, he doesn't have any room for fear in his heart. And the other thing is this: if he prays, as he very adequately could, with his window shut, his door closed, curtains pulled, that would seem to demonstrate some fear, wouldn't it, on his part to these men? He knows what's taken place. So he does just like he always has since he was a boy. Verse 11, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying. Oh, it just so happened that all these guys are standing outside of his window at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's strange, huh? And he was making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree? These guys, I think they have some experience in government. They're setting all this up beautifully. They don't come in saying, hey, Daniel, and the king's going to immediately say, oh, I love that guy. And, hey, king, remember that law that you just signed? Did you not sign a decree that any man who petitions any god within 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? So keep the personal side of things out of it. Let's just deal with the specifics of the law. And the king answered and said, yeah, the thing's true. And it's according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not change. They're so glad that he inserted that. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, now it becomes personal. That Daniel, not one of your vice regents, but he's one of the captives from Judah. He was a slave, and you kindly exalted him to this position of prominence. Does not show due regard for you, O king. It's personal. He's disrespecting you, of all people, God in the flesh, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petitions 3 times a day. Why do you think they waited until the conclusion of the day to go back and to accuse him? Why not just whenever they see him doing it, immediately go back and tell the king? More evidence. This is like a 3-fold evidence right here. He did it not once, not twice, king, but 3 times in the first day after you, God in the flesh, signed this law. Therefore these men approached the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that there is the law to the Medes and the Persians, that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. But back in verse 14, the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself. I think that shows a pretty good heart right there. He's not upset at Daniel at all. It doesn't mention yet that he's upset with these guys. I think he is. But above all, he seems to be upset with himself. Now that's saying something for a guy in this position with the riches and the power that he holds. He could blame anybody for this. He says, this is nobody's fault but mine. And he's upset with himself. Joe? It really is. Thanks, Joe. Beautifully said. Okay, so at the end of verse 14, greatly displeased with himself, the king set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. Very personal. I mean, all the things this king could be doing this day and for himself and all the enjoyment, furthering the kingdom, more battles, and the only battle that's on his mind is saving this man's life. Shows the goodness of his heart. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. But there's a punishment coming to Daniel. Verse 16. So the king gave the command, because they come at night and say, hey, you got to do this before the sun goes down, or before the day ends anyway. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. That's tremendous confidence that it sounds like he has in the God of heaven. Could be wishful thinking on his part. I don't think it's because he's a servant of God. Why would you say that's probably accurate? He doesn't sound like he's a servant of God, not yet anyway. Very good, Paul. It may be at this point that he's convinced. Certainly by the end, he will personally be convicted. He does say right here, your God whom you serve, not our God whom we serve. I think he's more Daniel's God, but tremendous respect that he has for him and his God. Verse 17, Then a stone was brought, laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring. Signet like signature, that's essentially what this is. And with the signets of his Lord. He makes sure that those other guys put their signatures on it too. I think that's a wise move by the king. I think he wants to make sure that their names are beside this treacherous action that have taken place concerning Daniel. That the purpose concerning God's prophet might not be changed. Verse 18, Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. You might have in your version, no entertainers or an entertainment. Some believe this is women who would have been brought before him, whatever it is. He doesn't go through his normal course. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. For me, my nighttime entertainment, I'm pretty lame. Doesn't watch TV that night. Nothing like the norm. Verse 19, And the king arose very early in the morning after a sleepless night, went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, as contrasted with what kind of gods? Almost like acknowledging that maybe the others aren't alive or aren't real. That's interesting. Has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, his messenger, and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. Now that's a statement very similar to what happens with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. What was not found on them? No injury, but also not even the smell of smoke. There's no mention here, but I wonder if DNA experts would come in, if they would fail in being able to take a single lion's hair or even a slight slobber from drooling that might have dripped. I don't think you're going to find that on them. at all on him. In verse 24, and the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, whose signatures were found on the treacherous action. And they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives, which sounds awful, doesn't it? But that's part of the law of the Medes and Persians. When you're found guilty of treason, it's not just you who pay the price. It's also your entire family. Now, how many treasonous people do you think lived under that empire? I'm going to say it was a pretty good warner of what could come. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. This isn't a matter where the lions had eaten before, so they weren't hungry. They were hungry all night long. And they took care of these men who were thrown in. Then King Darius wrote to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the unique, or maybe even only, living as contrasted with dead and powerless gods, steadfast forever. His kingdom, not mine, his kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. How did he do that? He sent his heavenly messenger to take away the power of the lions, their mouths. Verse 28, so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persians. For this reason, I don't believe these are the same people. It sounds like they're two different individuals that the Bible firmly establishes, this Darius and this Cyrus, which seem to be co-regents at the same time. As we close, I want to say this, though. Does it sound familiar at all? The proclamation that's made throughout all his kingdom about the greatness of the God of Daniel. Who else did this? Nebuchadnezzar? You remember him? So we see history repeating itself over again. All right, so as we close, I just want to make this very quick application. If you don't care, turn to 1 Peter 5, and we are going to finish on this. The whole purpose, I think, of this study and why it should be perhaps the most well-known story in Scripture. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, we're told, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Verse 9, though, we're told, resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. You're not alone in this. Daniel's not alone either. There's still a hungry, nasty lion who's trying to eat every one of you. But you stand up against him and you beat him. He might not be the king of the jungle, but he's the king of the desert, isn't he? He's the king of land, outside of the tiger maybe. So how do we resist the lion? We can't ward him off. Look back in verse 7 of 1 Peter 5. Do it this way. Cast all your care upon him. Pray to God, for he cares for you. How did Daniel get out of this? He was a praying man, and the Lord brought him out. Verse 10 of 1 Peter 5, may the God of all grace, who called us through Jesus Christ, after you have suffered a while, establish, strengthen, and settle you. Listen to this, verse 6. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty God, that he may exalt you, or you could translate that he may lift you up in due time. What happens to Daniel when he's cast down to be eaten by the lions? At the right time, God brings him up out of the pit. And now in 1 Peter 5, verse 11, to him be the glory and the dominion. Does that sound forever? Or does that sound familiar? Forever and ever. Amen. And when it's all said and done, you can exalt him like Daniel, Darius, like Nebuchadnezzar, to everyone you know. That's pretty cool stuff, isn't it? I know it's going through it pretty quickly, but I feel like it's the perfect application made in the New Testament from the story. So that's through Daniel, the 6th chapter, very familiar, Daniel in the lion's den. open it up just in the minute about we have left. Any comments on this, though, before we close outside of what's been brought out already? Okay. All right, well, I appreciate your attention, your input. I know that's covering a lot in a single class period. For next time, we're going back to the future in chapter 10. We've already covered 7, 8, and 9, so we're going back to chapter 10. Memory work's going to be number 12, Daniel 10:12, and that will be for next week. Okay, thanks.